And for Yaakov Ben-Dov, Palestine was a place of dreams. It was his and other Zionists' desired Jewish homeland. Born in the Ukraine, Ben-Dov moved to Palestine in 1907. On December 11th, 1917, Ben-Dov began both his film career and the beginning of Zionist cinema in Palestine. Mere seconds of surviving film depict the British arrival in Jerusalem, led by General Edmund Allenby. Although not extravagant, the marching of troops and armed soldiers riding on horseback is momentous for Jews living in Palestine. The arrival of Allenby and the beginning of British occupation was met with euphoria by the Jewish population of Jerusalem. Yaakov Ben-Dov's first film, Judea Liberated, has not fully survived since its filming in 1917. The remains of its existence include its detailed program and short clips that were used in later films. I do have a brief video I'll show of these remaining clips. I will mute it just because it is in a different language and this wouldn't be original to it. These would have been silent clips, and these were tacked onto later films that were produced by Zionists. And so as you can see here, it is very, very simple. It's just a lot of military figures from Great Britain riding on horseback or marching. And so these are just the few remaining clips of this first film that was produced. All right. And then noted as being Palestine's most prolific filmmaker of the silent era and for being the pioneer of Jewish film in Palestine, Ben-Dov's impact via visual culture is important in understanding early 20th century Zionist propaganda and its spread. While many of Ben-Dov's 30 films have been lost, the remaining films show his and Zionist leaders' hopes and desires for Israel. By focusing on 3 of Ben-Dov's surviving films, The Land of Israel Liberated, 1919, Land of Promise, 1924, and Springtime in Palestine, 1928, and additionally placing them into contexts of gender and nationalism, disparities in depictions of women and men's participation in constructing a Jewish state is prevalent. Using the Israel-Palestine conflict as a locus of nationalistic behaviors, the examination of these 3 films that were produced to promote Zionism provides a unique view of representation and the creation of identity and culture through visual media. By focusing on women and gendered notions of nationalism, visuals of prosperity, and depictions of serene farms and frontiers, it is clear that Ben-Dov's films work to construct a desirable state through the creation of national myths of peace and prosperity. Spanning over 100 years, Palestine and Israel have been in conflict over the land that Palestine resides on. As a major trading route between the Mediterranean and Egypt with Southwest Asia, the territory is a place of interlinking histories between various groups and peoples. It also contains Jerusalem and major holy site for Jews, Muslims, and Christians. Due to the religious and historical context of this land, competing nationalisms have given way to ongoing conflict. With the Ottoman Empire being described as the mixture of Muslim, Christian, and Jewish communities, all living and working together in their shared homeland, World War I marked a definitive shift in clashing interests among these 3 groups. By the Mandate period, Jews influenced by Zionism began to segregate themselves from their neighbors, environment, and their empire. David Vital's The Origins of Zionism is foundational in contextualizing and explaining the beginnings of Zionism. Vital's argument rests upon the idea that modern Jewish nationalism is the result of a majority of Jews seeing themselves as a member of a single, if scattered people, bound by a common descent, a common faith, and ritual, common languages, and to a very significant extent, a common history. Zionism in the modern period became present in the 1880s and developed in an Eastern European and Russian context, as he refers to this region as the Jewish heartland. The desires for Jews for Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, and the growth of anti-Semitism coupled with a scaling back of their rights in Eastern Europe led to them becoming a political group that sought legal emancipation and a place for a legal home in Palestine. Spanning from the 1920s to 1950s, Zionist realism focused on the making of the new Jew and the depictions of Zionist utopias in film. Zionist realism focused on group imagery rather than that of the individual. The hard but rewarding work of men, women, and children became common themes, as well as the perseverance of the Jewish pioneer as they continued to colonize parts of Palestine. Another cornerstone of Zionist realism films was the emphasis on national redemption, the realization of a Zionist enterprise in Palestine, and ideas of reviving Palestinian land. These are all present in the films of Yaakov Ben-Dov. Released in 1919, The Land of Israel Liberated is the second film directed by Yaakov Ben-Dov and the first film released by Menorah, the first Palestinian film company that was registered to Yaakov Ben-Dov and Mark Schwartz. Focused on northern Palestine, the film is comprised of panning shots that show the everyday life of Jews in a liberated state. While there is no distinct plot in this film or the other similar films that will be discussed, the scenes glorifying the pioneering lifestyle of Jewish Palestinian settlers. From men guiding carriages being pulled by horses to children being led to local well by a woman. This film provides viewers with peaceful scenes of Jews living and thriving in a space that is their own. When examining a scene in which a woman leads children to a well in the colony of Sedgera, the way in which this is shot is filmed makes it appears as if there is an endless stream of Jewish children following a matriarchal figure. Dressed in white shirts and hats, the children march across the screen from right to left following their female lead. According to the historians who have written on early Zionist films, this may be argued to be a scene of the Zionist collective, as it is depicting a large group of people. I argue that this is signifying the prosperity of Zionist colonization in a society through the depiction of clean and seemingly healthy Jewish children. This scene is also placing the duty of caring for children, the future of Zionism, into the hands of Jewish women. The women in the scene, along with other women depicted later in the film and the other two being analyzed, have distinct and purposeful roles in the efforts of Zionism. They are caregivers, field laborers, fruit pickers, and the nurturers and mothers of Zionism. In the following scene focused on Melhamiah, that is pictured here, children herd and chase livestock being driven down the street. Among the children who are chasing birds and cows, a small girl in a white dress and apron skips and claps after the animals. While not the focus of the scene as it ends with Jewish men driving a wagon, she stays centered on the road as she assists with maneuvering the animals. With a focus on Zionist pioneers and the reclaiming of space, Ben-Dov is showing that this young Jewish girl is doing both in her own way. She's excitedly participating in an age-appropriate way and returns home after the chore is over. Although her face is obscured due to the age and condition of this film, the ways in which she runs and skips with the other children among the cows suggest that they are playing. While there is a serious tone to Ben-Dov's films, this scene shows more than strict hard work being done by the Zionists. It also shows Jewish joy thanks to their involvement in Zionism. Land of Promise is a very direct propaganda compared to the Land of Israel Liberated. The film begins with scrolling text declaring that the Romans had captured Jerusalem away from the Jews and that the Zionist movement in the 1917 Balfour Declaration had given Jews a national home in Palestine. The continual reference to Palestine as a place of restoration furthers the Zionist idea that they are not only taking their land back, they're also putting it into its original state. With the arrival of Jews by boat to the city of Jaffa, the film tells its audience via text that Jewish immigrants to Palestine receive assistance through their journey from the Keren Hayasat, a foundation fund for Zionist endeavors in Palestine. Different from the depictions of the mostly pioneer-focused Land of Israel Liberated, the new Jewish woman arrives in the land of Palestine wearing fine dresses, fur coats, high heels. Zionism was not just for poor Jews who faced pogroms and exile, it was also for wealthy Jews who believed in having a designated homeland of their own. The idea of the Jewish pioneer switched to Jewish settler as the film continues, showing a shift in Zionist identity and appeals to Jews in the US and Europe. Palestine breeds Bonnie babies flashes onto the screen as a smaller text lets viewers know that the Keren Hayasat gives financial support to the Hadassah medical organization so that mothers and babies can get help and health care once in Palestine. Shown in the next scene, a smiling woman sits with two young children on her lap. 5 other young children and babies are around her and are being held by an obscured figure in the background. This image of mother and child or woman with children is followed by more text that says the hope of the future, referencing the children present as well as the possibility of an endless amount of women to give birth to more Jewish children in the hopes of Zionist leaders, including Ben-Dov. The next scenes are directed towards Jewish women as they try to alleviate fears immigrating to Palestine because it is still a work in progress. Jews in an American or European context are shown smiling faces, well-dressed children, and access to healthcare and education for themselves and their future offspring. They are meant to be motivators. Along with this, these Zionist colonies enable Jews and their children to celebrate their culture and holidays without worry. With a massive focus on gaining the engagement of female Jews in the Zionist project, Ben-Dov's films show that women are important and integral to the continuation of Zionism. They were desired, wanted, and needed for Ben-Dov's Zionist dreams to become reality. by trying to provide visuals of happy, fashionable, and integrated women in these Jewish colonies who are performing a variety of work that is not exclusively focused on children, albeit child rearing is important and glorified. Ben-Dov is appealing to as many women as possible. By shifting from the pioneer narrative to the settler narrative, Land of Promise is inviting others to join a society that has been partially built but does not need to be constructed from the ground up like the land of Israel liberated. Springtime in Palestine follows the propagandistic nature of Land of Promise as it addresses audiences in Europe with on-screen captions that are in German. Shifting from the desert and ruins to sprawling fields of fruit trees, Zionists are shown as a modernizing force in Palestine as they continue to work the land and build massive, technologically advanced cities. After these scenes, the words, "A new spring is blowing over Eretz Yisrael, a new life is rising from the old soil," are followed by Judean blossoms. As it transitions back to film, a close-up of two large oranges in front of endless leaves fill the screen. After a procession of children are handed saplings that need to be planted, they march until the scene shifts to women handing saplings off to men who are planting them to make brand new orange groves. With the film telling audiences that these days the land is filled with the scent of oranges, Ben-Dov is suggesting to audiences that the planting and growth of oranges is new and directly related to Zionists tending the land. The oranges displayed on screen are more famously known as Jaffa oranges. These oranges are linked to livelihoods and economic standing in Palestine. The growing of, caring for, and sale of these oranges to local and European markets provides steady income for Arabs and Jews. The imagery of oranges in Ben-Dov's films fits into a larger and ongoing depiction of nationalistic tensions. While Ben-Dov's serene groves provide bounties of fruit to the Jews who are caring for them, it is important to mention that a more recent film released in 2009, Jaffa, The Orange's Clockwork, argues that Zionist discourse shaped the imagery of Jaffa oranges. They now symbolize the idea of Jews and Zionist pioneers and settlers made the desert bloom through their own hard work, even though it was a collective effort that began with Arab laborers and later involved Jews. With Springtime in Palestine relying heavily on the imagery of young Zionists planting, tending, and eventually packaging massive amounts of fruit from their orange groves, Ben-Dov is continually connecting Jews and Zionism with abundance and economic viability and even prosperity. Ben-Dov's films depict Jaffa oranges, seemingly leaving the same ports for Jewish immigrants arrived in Palestine earlier in the film and in Land of Promise. The fruits of the Zionist endeavor to build a homeland had come to realization. So what is desirable about the mundane? Why does Ben-Dov's Zionist propaganda examine the same subjects repeatedly? From the threat of violence, forced removal, and anti-Semitism in Europe and beyond, the picturesque and simple atmosphere of Jewish life in Palestine is inviting and fantastical. Ben-Dov does not show the conflict between Jews and Arabs in his films, only on the successful and pioneering nature of the Zionist settlers. The advent of Zionism in response to anti-Semitism, coupled with the hope of returning to a homeland, Ben-Dov's films try to gain support in reclaiming a bountiful land, hardworking men and women, children in abundance, and bounties of oranges. Women, children, and produce were used as tools to construct desirous and idealized versions of Jewish and Zionist identity and culture through visual media by Yaakov Ben-Dov, and they became tools in which Zionism was spread through.